life shifted to an alternate space.
Yes, meeting the needs of the moment.
Yeah. Isn't it nice to be able to have the flexibility to not have to control?
Yeah,
It's so good.
I love it. I love it so much.
But we have
relinquishing control is like
it's the
so healing.
best. So we're in a new space. I'm going to let you choose another question.
Okay.
And I'm also going to take the pull-up bar out the door.
Oh, I just picked the same one. I guess that was important to talk about.
Yeah.
Okay. Put it back in the deck. Oh, hilarious. What are you hoping I won't ask about? What am I hoping you won't ask about?
Yeah. Is there anything springing to mind? I love including that question because it's so high sensation.
So yeah, well, actually, nothing's off limits. I have no fears about what you ask. I am in such a place in my life, in my healing, in my understanding of where I've been and where I'm going, even if I don't know where I'm going, because it's, there's so much unknown. I just have I have a deep relationship with where I've gone, and I have such a trust of where I'm going that that there's not anything that I'm not willing to talk about, because I think it all fucking needs to be talked about.
Yeah.
I just really believe that. There's so much taboo, there's so many secrets, I came from a life of secrets, whether they were my own or whether it was imposed upon me from, family secrets or, social and cultural taboo, I'm just here to take the lid off and just not have an opinion about whether it needs to be talked about. Like, it's not up to me whether or not it needs to be talked about. If it comes up, then I say yes to the universe. Yes, let's talk about it.
I love that you've gone that direction with this question, because just a little while ago, we were talking about my journey and having become so depleted. And part of the reason behind that was I had a major trauma occur when I was 9 months into my marriage. And the very well-meaning advice that I received was, that's your husband. Take that to your grave with you.
Oh, wow.
And so rather than going to my friends, going to my support system, the people that I knew who cared about me deeply, and telling them what was happening or telling them what had occurred, I felt like I wasn't allowed or safe to do that. And so not only was I carrying this huge burden, this huge secret with me, but now because of it, as his mental health is wearing thin, mine's wearing thin, the patterns in the marriage are starting to become really unhealthy, really toxic, and really abusive. I can't communicate that to my friends either. And so it was a lot of hiding what was going on. And even the areas that I didn't know were becoming abusive, if I had been talking freely to the people that cared about me, they would have been seeing it. Even if I wasn't able to see it, if I were disclosing the things that I should have been seeking my support system around, they would have noticed it and they would have said something. I so trust my friends and my family at that point in my life, and even still now, that they would have rather destroyed our relationship trying to get me to fix things um, than keeping quiet. So it could have been a very different experience.
Yeah, I'm so sorry that you received that guidance.
Mm-hmm.
That's a real, to me, it speaks to the bigger picture messages of how we as a culture, and not even like Western culture, perhaps, but really just like modern culture, like, the times that we're in, that we live from here up.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're so disembodied as a collective that we can't handle that. So you need to go handle it
Mm-hmm.
by not handling it so that we don't have to handle it.
Yeah, don't rock the boat because it's too much.
Oh my gosh. And that in and of itself is a trauma on top of a trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm really sorry that you experienced that guidance, because yeah, that's a tragedy.
Thank you.
For your system.
I think
your body.
Yeah, my
Your
body
heart.
was real jacked up. I had like an
Mm-hmm.
underbite, and like I remember the first time I had my sports injury specialist work on my hips. He's like, "I've never heard you be totally silent." I'm like, "I'm in so much pain." Yeah, there were a lot of constricting movements and ways I was carrying myself. But to piggyback on what you were saying before about your acceptance, becoming forgiveness, becoming peace and grace, that was my experience as well. And once I came to arrive through going through enough of the grieving process of my marriage and really coming to terms with that happened, and you stayed and you did that. Once I was able to move through enough of the grief to arrive at acceptance, that to me felt very similar to forgiving it. I forgave the past for having occurred. And at this phase in my journey, I wouldn't take it back. I don't want to go back and redo those years. It just, for me, in order for me to get here and be this woman who is amazing, it couldn't have been any other way. It had to be that way. And I'm really grateful for that. And I do wish my ex-husband well. He's been talked about a lot, just in general, and then now more especially as I'm entering a new relationship. It's like, oh, well, there's new things to discuss and new emotions that are surfacing, and yeah, quite a journey.
Yeah. I think that there's a few things that you said there that piqued my attention, but where you ended was on this idea of like, talking about old relationships, entering into new relationships, and also having an understanding of all the things that have happened that have shaped you walking into this new relationship. When I talk about forgiveness being a big thing that I learned in recovery, that took years. I mean, it wasn't like I got sober and exponentially everything, got better, and I just rode rode the wave, it was not like that at all. I mean, it was riptide, it was hurricane, it was, you know, thinking that I'm okay and everything is good and I've got my head above the water and I'm floating on my back and, you know, and then all of a sudden just like, you know, nature shows up or an ant, you know, in the analogy, like a shark or, you know, something is always happening. And not to say that it was, you know, always tragedy, but I guess I'm speaking to where I am today is having navigated those waters in whatever way they showed up, calm, rocky, disastrous, whatever, that involved relationships, romantic relationships, two marriages, and some sobriety in between my first marriage and my second marriage. And both of them being a disaster in their own ways. I have a sense of ownership now of why they looked the way they looked. Not because, you know, it was all my fault, but certainly not because it was all their fault. Can remember, you know, moving into my second marriage, thinking like, oh my gosh, I've made so much progress in my recovery. Emotionally, I'm just so much better and much more grounded, and I've learned so much about myself and my history. I'm not drinking and using anymore, yada yada. I was about 4 years sober at that time. And so I got into a relationship and what ended up happening was things were triggered in me, and I use that word not in terms of like a trigger, but just like poked, prodded, you know, opened, that kind of thing. Things were provoked in me that only were going to be provoked by having a partner. I could have gone on 4 more years in recovery, doing all the beautiful things that recovery has, all the challenges, all the self-discovery and inventories and all of that. And still there are pockets that unless we have a mirror, they're not going to get revealed. You know, not to say that 4 years later it would have looked exactly the same. I don't mean that. I don't have any idea what it would have looked like. But I have an understanding now that that relationship exposed parts of me that it was really easy to blame on him. And out of the relationship, years later, I've been out of the relationship for about 6 years now. And it lasted for about 6 years. But out of the relationship, I'm so grateful that that I got that shit out of the way, you know, because now I, on one hand, have such a beautiful relationship with myself and such a deep relationship with my heart, my sexuality, my traumas, my children, my career, my purpose. You know, there's a richness that the next relationship I get in, if if that's where my life goes, like that's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm here. That's how I want to relate. And I don't know that I would have gotten here without that sample of purging. And I don't mean to minimize it by calling it a sample or maximize it by calling it a purging, but in some way it was an experiment.
Yeah.
And I wanted to keep working at it. I think some of that was probably codependence. But some of it was my soul, like just kind of intuitively, I am hungry for renewal and transformation and wellness and healing and self-responsibility. And so I was hungry to get it right, so to speak, and get through it. And that's just not the course that it took. And so it eventually ended, and that's fine. But yeah, I've learned a lot in relationship and out of relationship about relating.
And I'm glad that you're sharing about having the opportunity to have mirrors and have those people in our lives that show up, and also to have the ability to have done several years of your recovery journey single and then go into relationship and see that the demons are there. Because that's what I'm going through presently. I'm a month, 6 weeks, they're waiting. And like I'm with this wonderful man, and like, man, I can see those demons, and I'm like, oh, I remember you. You're back. I thought you were gone. I thought you were gone. But all of those years of recovery are so helpful to at least being able to see when it's a demon and a wound. And to see that there's a little bit more to unpack there. And hopefully you and I and everybody else is able to go slowly enough and see clearly enough to see when that sneaky wound is coming up.
So I'm not under any delusion whatsoever that that I won't have those if I am in a romantic relationship with a partner. I expect an even deeper layer to show up, because they still show up single, whether I'm relating to my parents, friends, children, dating, whatever, that stuff still shows up. And so I've been on this journey of shadow hunting is the term that's used, where I have a willingness to see through the dynamic that's going on and not make it about the other person, but like, how am I showing up to this dynamic? It's very uncomfortable. I feel triggered. This is, this sucks, whatever. Even if I were to say, he's doing this, she's doing that, whatever. That is an alert to me to go in and look at how am I showing up. And so then I start this process of shadow hunting, like looking at, how are my dysfunctions, how are my wounds, informing how I'm showing up in this moment. And so what I look forward to in terms of like a romantic relationship is how to do that with someone who also wants to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not about finding someone that's perfect where none of that shit shows up. I don't believe that at all. It's choosing someone that's willing to do it as well, because that's the caliber of relationship, self-relationship and other relationship it's the only thing that's acceptable to me. Yeah.
I love that. That's true reciprocity.
Yeah.
Now that we're coming to a close of part one of our interview, I have more questions that I want to include in part two. So you and I will have to glance at the calendars.
Yeah, let's do it again. This is juicy.
It was so juicy. I put out how many? We had 5 questions and we did 2, but now I have a couple more that I'll be adding.
Yeah, I'm excited. Let's keep it going.
Yes, this was so great.
Thank you.
Bijou, thank you for being here.
Oh my gosh.
I love you.
I love you. And I love these conversations. I love the exposure.
I do too.
Yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to really talk some of it through, you know?
It's so valuable. I think everything we do should be recorded. I was actually thinking the other day as I was driving, like, I wish I had all of my early therapy sessions or like some more documentation outside of my journaling of my early healing journey. Because that shit is bananas.
Yes, I believe it.
Okay.